and welcome to day 4 of our Alabama Community Mapping Forum number 2. This forum is a collaboration of several Alabama organizations across the state, including the League of Women Voters, ACLU, Alabama Values Progress, the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Alabama Forward, Alabama Election Protection Network, TOPS, and the Legal Defense Fund. We are recording this forum and live streaming to the League of Women Voters Alabama Facebook page. Also, we have the closed caption capability turned on. All you have to do is go to the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on Turn Subtitles On. And if you have any questions, please ask your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We will try to answer all your questions at the end tonight. I do hope that you watched our first forum on October 13th, where we discussed fair maps from a legal viewpoint. And then the last 2 nights, we have focused on the State House, the Alabama State House, and the Alabama State Senate maps, with insights from both organizations and teams of citizens who have reviewed the maps that the legislature released, and they went in depth to give some evaluations on the fairness of the maps and the effects of the maps to their own backyards and what's going on in Alabama. As of today, all the redistricting maps for Alabama have been through the legislature. They were introduced and they were passed, and that was pretty quick. So as I mentioned, this is our 4th night. If Kathy, if you could pull up the slide on, just to kind of go over what our schedule has been. We realized early on there's a lot to cover in going through this process, and we wanted to go over it in a way that we gave people time to look at everything and time to discuss things. So we are here on November 3rd. Last week we did a review of the legislature process and kind of a viewpoint of what we thought would happen. On the 1st, we reviewed the state maps, and last night reviewed the Senate maps. Tonight, we're going to focus on the congressional maps that were released last week or this week and passed, and they are through. They've all gone through. And tonight, we have a distinguished panel of experts on our roundtable discussion. Let's see, we have Mitchell Brown. He is with the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. We have Christie. He is a lawyer who is working with the League of Women Voters of Alabama. We have Trupania Bonner as the Executive Director for the Crescent Media Group and is a redistricting consultant. And we have Dr. Kareem Crayton, who is the Executive Director of the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. Do we have everybody here tonight? I know we were having a little trouble getting, this was all, you know, as we've joked about putting this forum together, we said we got to be super Gumbies, and we have been very Gumby about today. So we have changed a lot of things around. There you are, Dr. Creighton, appreciate you here. And Mitchell Brown and Christie. I do not see Trupania Bonner.
I don't see them in the audience either. So
okay, well, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate having such distinguished people here to talk about the mapping that is going on in Alabama. And I know that you all are also looking at what's going on across the South and across the country. From a discussion of the Alabama Congressional Map, it was approved today, and I really would like to see what your thoughts on is to talk about the map that was passed and any concerns or issues you see in those maps that passed through the legislature today. And to open it up, if it's okay, I'd like Dr. Creighton, if you would go first to just kind of talk about that, please, sir.
Thanks, Ms. Caruso. And just so that I'm sure my friend Mitch knows this, I've not been with the Southern Coalition for a long period of time. That's okay.
I got it
I
off
just,
Google.
no worries, no worries. Google might not have caught up in certain places, but yeah, for the last year or two, I've been actually back working full time with my consulting firm, which I began about 10 years ago, and have been doing work around the country and including in Alabama. And, as for full disclosure, in this instance, I, among other places, have been advising the House Democratic Caucus in Alabama as they've gone through the process so far. And, they're, of course, aware that I've decided to offer comment here. My discussion here will be limited really to the comment about the maps themselves. And I will just say, with respect to that issue, I can just say generally what the state legislature adopted. And, unfortunately, I think everybody on this call knows that there wasn't as robust, or in fact, I'd say even a minimum level of public discourse and engagement the legislature did and maybe should have done in providing these districts. Generally, I have three guiding rules with redistricting. The process needs to be transparent, it needs to be based on data, and it needs to involve the public. And I think for a number of reasons, the maps that were adopted failed all three tests in different ways. For this moment, I'll just talk about the maps that were adopted rather than any of the other competing maps. I'll just say for the moment that this map tends to fail for me because it doesn't start from the proposition of understanding where the state is in terms of its performance with respect to racially polarized voting. That's always a first step that I ask anybody who's presenting a map to me, particularly in the South, about whether or not the map is legal. What I am really disappointed to see was the chairman, pontificate without any support on the notion that the map complies with the Voting Rights Act. And when pressed to tell us why he thinks it complies, he says, well, we have a district that hits a particular percentage, and our person told us, unnamed, whoever this person was, it didn't need to have any further study on racially polarized voting. That's exactly how you get yourself sued. They seem to want that. That's their choice. But it is fair to say that with respect to this map, what is evident is, one, they purported on the congressional side to try to split as few precincts as possible, they said, and to split as few counties as possible, while also complying with one person, one vote, and also the Voting Rights Act. And for their purposes, I think they offered a theory, not supported as I saw by any facts, that the district they drew was compliant. I'm, for the moment, going to spare further discussion about what that district looks like or what a fair district might be. But I will say, if you can't start from the proposition of what racially polarized voting looks like in the state, you can't tell me at any percentage that the configuration that you've drawn on a map is justified. And I'd say that regardless of the party that's in control or who's presenting a map. That's the first question you should always ask. The other thing I'll just add about it, and then I'm sure there are other great things that people want to share about their views on the maps. But I would just say, earlier I said that, public discourse was a part of the process, and you should judge a map by whether or not it reflects public input. And the other thing that we saw from the chairman, both in the House and Senate, was they said, well, we looked over it all. Well, there was obviously a series, they said 28 or so public hearings, but we never saw any evidence that they actually took any of what they said into account. And that, to me, was really troublesome. To the extent that the public is going to judge a map, it needs to match up with the input that they offered. And of course, we didn't have input after the maps were drawn from the public. And so we also didn't see from their presentation any connection about the quantum of information provided by the public about whether the present maps were working, or the counties that were sort of split that weren't before were, ones that people were comfortable with, et cetera. And so as far as the congressional map is concerned, I feel like it fails again, those three tests that I offered. You know, I don't know, and this is, I guess, the question maybe other people will want to talk about, the relevance that the state put on the question about whole counties is sort of a novel move. I know that the state constitution talks about whole counties, but it does so with respect to state legislative districts. And that seemed to be the place where they failed. And, you know, I'm happy to talk more about that. But I just would encourage everyone to look carefully at not just sort of what the maps do, but what the state's justification was for creating the map that they did. There are a lot of different ways that one might go, but to me, the real failure of this process, aside from not including the public in it, was just the failure to explain their decisions. The arm waving and the blaming of the U.S. Census didn't do the work, but that's kind of my immediate take on the matter.
Yeah, and did you get the impression that they didn't understand it either, that they kind of hired it out and they just took what they got? I mean, that's what hit me.
Well, that's another question. I mean, we tried to find out things from the chairman about these unnamed people that gave them advice or blessings. We heard one name, Mr. Drummond, who, you know, has, they said, 25 years of experience. And again, I don't know what his experience was the last cycle, but if he was the guy that gave him advice the last cycle, probably a good indicator that he's going to get them sued again and unsuccessfully able to defend it. But what troubles me is if there were a report that offered justification for what they did, we could at least scrutinize that and either be comfortable or not with it. But you're right, the sort of arm waving and at times inability to explain what they did and why they did it is troubling. And, you know, if I were looking at this as a dress rehearsal for a lawsuit, I wouldn't necessarily be all that confident if I were them.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Christie, would you like to comment on the map that they passed? You're muted.
Sorry about being muted. I'm a lawyer, and my perspective on a lot of these issues is what can you win in a lawsuit? And while I think that the transparency, the lack of considering what the public said, and the failure to explain the process would be relevant in a lawsuit, I don't think that you would be able to win a lawsuit challenging the map with just those factors. And there's different judgments that go into these types of things. One, you've got to recognize that the courts that any kind of lawsuit would be filed in are going to be primarily Republican appointees. And so we've got a Republican supermajority legislature who courts are supposed to defer to some extent to what the legislature does. You are going to have Republican judges making judgments about whether or not they did the right thing. And so it's going to be hard to have a different result through the legislative process. I will point out that they did take some steps this time that make the map that they passed look less objectionable than what they've done in the past. I can identify three things just off the top of my head. One is that they kept more counties whole. They split about half as many counties as they did last time. They split about a tenth as many precincts. Last time the current map, right, the one that's operative until the governor signs the legislation that's adopted the new map, had over 1,000 precincts that were split, and currently there's only about 100 precincts that were split. The other thing that was happened is that they did not pack District 7 as fully as has been packed in the past. And so at one time, District 7 had 67% Black voters. I believe currently it has 64% minority voters. And the current map that just got passed by the Alabama legislature, which is going to the governor, has about 54%. And so you can see that they've taken some steps trying to insulate themselves from litigation or losing in litigation, which they've typically done in the past. The legislature has typically done in the past. So it's very hard to make judgments about what a court is going to do. But one trend in the law is to disfavor racial gerrymandering. And I think they tried to make an effort to make it look less like racial gerrymandering than the current map does. Party-based gerrymandering is not something that the courts would get involved with. And so, if you just look at the map with your naked eye, Montgomery used to be divided up into 3 districts, and now Montgomery is only divided into 1 district. And as you can sort of see, they've kept sort of precincts together. And the same thing about Jefferson County. Jefferson County used to have one long arm that reached into it, and now it sort of looks like an elbow, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. And so they have taken steps to make the map look less objectionable just on seeing it with your naked eye, and taking other steps. I still think that the current map is carried forward in the new map that the legislature just passed. And so the state in 2019 admitted that the current map was racially gerrymandered in a lawsuit. And the similarities between the map that just got passed and the current map, the one that's being replaced, suggests that it also has impermissible racial gerrymanders, but recognize those are questions of intent, and what the courts will do is difficult to predict, and that's where we are right now.
Thank you very much. Mitchell Brown, what are your thoughts on the map that's been passed? And which was passed very much against by party lines, right?
Yeah. My thoughts are, my colleagues, Kareem and Christie, they honed in on the maps, and y'all are down there in Alabama. My comments are more broadly about the future. One of the things that we've seen, and Kareem brought this up, is the lack of racially polarized voting study. We've seen that in other states across the South, where states are refusing to do this racially polarized voting study and are drawing maps without any type of understanding of where the Black voters are in their states, or where the Latinx voters are in their state, and that's something that we've seen across the South. And I don't think that is a coincidence, but more so a consequence of the Shelby County decision and not having Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. These states across the South don't have to get preclearance. And so they feel that they have the freedom to pass maps that they otherwise would not have passed under Section 5, because they would retrogress the Black vote. And now they are basically rolling the dice about whether or not they're going to get sued on these maps. So they don't have the same fear of the federal government that they did before. And that's not by coincidence. We've seen it in the state maps. We've seen it in local maps across the South. So I just wanted to note that. And then second, we are focused on 2020, the 2020 census now, but we have to think about 2030 as well. And what happens to the majority minority districts in Alabama? What happens to the population shifts in Alabama? Are the districts that are drawn, are they going to be able to elect, are Black voters in those districts going to be able to elect candidates of choice moving forward? I think about Congresswoman Sewell. When she retires, who's going to take her place? Because in my opinion, again, not being from Alabama, my opinion is just they packed District 7, less than they did before, but that also could be seen as them chipping away at that district. And so we want to make sure, that the Black voters in that district are able to elect their candidate of choice for the long term, not just for this election. There are certain realities that, again, that we have to focus on this election with the maps that we have. But my mind goes to the 2030 and making sure that the districts, can we create another district, another opportunity district for Black voters, other than just the one majority minority district that is there. So that's where my mind goes. And my last comment goes to this congressional map, one of the things that we have to pay attention to, and I think the courts are going to have to clarify, is what does it mean to be a VRA district? I've heard from different organizations in the voting rights field, that some are pushing for opportunity, what are known as opportunity districts, while some are pushing for majority minority districts. We have to, I think we're going to have to coalesce, around a definition, and both can be useful in compliance with the Voting Rights Act, but we just have to make sure that we're being careful about what we call a Voting Rights Act district, because it's about the opportunity to elect the candidate of choice. And if you can elect the candidate of choice from a district that is less than 50% plus one, then that to me is a viable VRA district. Others may disagree, but that to me is my thought. And so just something that I've noticed, in this conversation for over the last couple of months.
Okay, well, that's so you're not just looking at these maps, you're looking at 2030 and what happens afterwards. And that's kind of the way you got to have a longer vision.
Yeah, and because what we've seen is, the majority minority districts of yesteryear, I will call them, that were passed and were created because of the Voting Rights Act, with 65% Black voting age population, now is being chipped away. Those districts are going down, either because they want to give the legislatures want to give the illusion that they're not packing Black voters into these districts. But what I've seen and what my supervisor would call a death by 1,000 cuts. If you keep on chipping away at these districts year after year, census cycle after census cycle, eventually you're going to have a district that is now more competitive than it was before, and that doesn't necessarily not use the word competitive. Less opportunity for Black voters to select their candidate of choice because now they make up a slim majority rather than a large enough majority to elect their candidate of choice.
Okay, Dr. Creighton, what do you think about that longer view?
Well, I tend to think that's what we all have to bear in mind. We're doing two things. I heard Christie say, and I tend to agree, you have to be thoughtful about what the courts will do. But of course, we've got to think about where the courts are right now and who's staffing them. And at the same time, I think Mitch's point about what the policy is in the first place. That we're supposed to be crafting districts that represent people, and we want to do it recognizing that we live in a society that has, particularly in Alabama, a particular racial history. And that's sort of the point I'm driving at. I think Mitch is absolutely right. There is a debate, and a lively one, about how to craft districts that comply with the Voting Rights Act, but more at the core of it, how do we make sure that people in communities where there's been a history of racial division, how are we sure that when we craft a district, at whatever percentage we arrive at for each racial group, that it actually is a fair space in which everybody has a chance to elect a candidate of choice, that there's an equal opportunity to do so. And my starting position, no matter where I am, no matter who's asking me, is show me evidence of what you think is the current state of the ability to elect. And then I'll start a conversation. We can have a more narrow conversation on the kind of configurations that continue that or need to, if need be, to enhance that. But I find it troubling anytime, as the legislature has done, at least the majority party has done there, to tell us, well, this is a number that we think makes sense, or this is a number and we don't need to look any further at it. That's where we should all be skeptical. And compliance with both the 14th Amendment, as Christie said earlier, but as well, there's part of the Voting Rights Act that's still alive and well until the Supreme Court tells us otherwise. Section 2 is viable law. And we have to assure that we're not crafting districts that, either because of their purpose or their effect, denies or bridges the right to vote with respect to race. And in this case, it means diluting Black voting opportunity.
Okay. Do you have anything to say to that, Christie? You're muted.
My wife is here, and so I do try to mute it when I'm not speaking. Historically, uh, in the late 80s and the early 90s, the understanding was that you had to have a 65% minority district in order for that to be a safe minority district. And I don't think that that's true anymore. And so recognize that these issues change over time. And I agree that 2030 and 2040, frankly, are also very important. And you have different issues. So if you took a district, and if you could look historically at what President Obama's vote was in 2012, what the vote was in 2016 for Clinton, and the vote for Biden in 2020, you could get a different view as over time as to how a minority might do in those districts. So it's, opportunity districts probably are, and this is again my personal judgment, are what the courts are going to stick to as opposed to safe districts. So a safe district at one time was 65%. I think most people would say now that a safe district is perhaps 55 or even 50%. So, the facts are changing as well as the law is developing.
Okay, all right. So there needs to be more conversation, obviously, and some coming of minds, I guess, if you will, on what a path forward. Because that a death of 1,000 cuts really strikes, doesn't it? How you can say you're complying, but you're making it going to make it more difficult in the future. I do want to ask you, there were 2 other proposed maps that were introduced during the legislature. I think it was today, and both were defeated. One was by Senator Singleton and the other one was Senator Hatcher. Do any of you have any thoughts on those 2 maps that you'd like to discuss?
Senator Singleton actually introduced 3 different maps.
Yeah.
He introduced one map that was what's been called the whole county plan. And you have actually pulled that up on the screen. And that map has about 2.46 variation. In other words, from the smallest district to the largest district, there's less than 2.5% difference in the districts. And the courts numerous times have approved districts with more variation than that. One person, one vote is an important rule that's to be followed. But if you'll notice that the State House and the State Senate plans were set up to have a variation among them that's twice as high as the whole county plan. They were set up to have a 5% variation. And so that's just, now, the other 2 plans that Senator Singleton introduced, one of them had a 0.69%. So it went from 2.46 to 0.69% variation. And in that plan, there were 3 counties that were split. And in the map that you see that's in front of you right now, there are no counties that are split. But in that map, there were 3 counties that were split for population variation purposes. And then there was another map that he presented that was very similar to the map that you see also, but it had 6 counties that were split. And that had a 0% population variation. And so my guess as to what Senator Singleton was doing, because I haven't spoken to him about this particular issue, was he was presenting maps that provided the legislators an opportunity to go with 0 variation or 0.69% variation if they thought 2.46 variation was too high, that still were not racially gerrymandered. And those maps were frankly, as far as I could tell, not considered.
Right. And I believe, there were discussions, I guess during the public hearing there were a couple maps that were presented, but they don't appear to have been thought of or reviewed. I know one of the things that we are trying to hit on these forums is that we would like to see that these kind of discussions we're having could show how the public being involved in this could help in the future. We're very much cut out, the public is. And that's one of the goals of this forum, is just to say, look, if you had public discussion, could you have a more fair way to do your maps and to get people to buy in so that they're not so polarized and they're not so contentious? And I would like to see if you guys agree on that. I'm sure you do, because I know you Dr. Creighton, you mentioned that. And I know you have to leave soon. Yeah.
Yes, thanks. I just want to mention one other map that I think the senator from Montgomery, my home county, presented, and I think it was on behalf of the Legal Defense Fund, Greater Birmingham Ministries, and I thought I saw somebody from the Alabama ACLU. I believe all supported a map that I think in most significant part creates, as they offered, 2 districts that had voting age populations for African Americans that were both above 50%. And their theory of the case is that they think, due to the prevalence, the continued prevalence of racially polarized voting, and the concentration of geographic configuration of where African Americans live, that Section 2 would actually create an obligation on the state to create 2 African American majority districts. Obviously, since 1992, Alabama has only had 1. The population in the state, I think, is roughly about 27% now African American. They've made the argument that they think it's viable, therefore the state should seriously consider it, and that was not adopted, as you mentioned in the earlier comments. I think that goes in part to the issue that Mitch brought up earlier. There are different ways of thinking about what is the best configuration to protect minority political opportunity. Robust conversation. That's one of those questions I think that the court needs to consider. But the main thing I would just offer in this point is going back to the question that you raised earlier, Pam. It was, these are choices, and the choices need to be informed by data, and they need to be informed by public input. And we got really neither of them in this process. And so, to the question about what one might do, I think you've got 3 lawyers here. You'll probably get a version of the same answer, which is, you should be able to show your process. A map is a map, right? The map is only as good as it actually represents the people who are supposed to be governed by it. And frankly, ultimately, the way in which they gave or didn't give input and assent to the kinds of configurations that were decided upon. And if you can't really show how either you did what they asked you to do, or if you didn't do it, why you didn't, and maybe why law doesn't allow you to, it does sort of invite a lot of dissent. And sometimes that dissent can land you into court. So I think one of the things that the public couldn't do is, as much as, we don't know what KI is going to do with those maps. I think being in touch with your members of the state legislature is important. Being in touch with KIV is important. And beyond that, just being closely following this stuff, really being in touch and following this stuff, because, the maps that were adopted in 2010, I'm sure the legislature thought it was a done deal. People didn't like it, but we're going to move forward. And a lawsuit ultimately overturned that. So I think following this and being vocal about it are 2 things that are really important. And, this is 2021. Next year is a statewide election. And we will know in Alabama soon whether or not, the people, whatever districts they're running under, have the consent of the folks who are governed by them. So I think that's actually at its core always a thing that you should do, which is to be active by voting.
Thank you. And Mitchell Brown, you have any comments on all of this?
Yep, I just wanted to double down on what Kareem just said, because the choice not to do a racially polarized voting study, the choice to not know where Black voters are in the state is indeed a choice. And as I said it earlier, a lot of states are saying that they're using race blind criteria, but the denial of looking at race, is a denial of Black voters' humanity, and it's a denial of protecting their right to vote. There is this what I've seen in my work is that there's this black and white type of situation that you either use race or you don't use race. There's no gray area. And that is just so far from the truth. The courts have talked about that tension between using race to comply with the Voting Rights Act and using race too much where it's predominant and now you're racially gerrymandering. And so the courts have talked about that tension, and it's not just black and white, and it's almost as if, the legislatures across the South are afraid to use race because they might be too tempted to racially gerrymander. It's almost it's like it's too tempting to racially gerrymander, and not actually figure out how to best help voters. But again, that's a choice. Like they're choosing to not protect Black voters, and that's an issue.
Okay, well, Tish, I see your videos on. Did you want?
Yes, ma'am. Just one point based on what we know on the ground. As we're talking about the FAIR maps and all of the things that we hope go into the data and the analysis, we have to keep in mind that the Black population in the state of Alabama grew by something along the lines of 5%. The minority population of Latinx and Asian residents in the state grew by leaps and bounds. And so the congressional map kept the districts that it has because we thought we might lose a district based on the strength of the increase in the minority population. The shifts in population across the state moved towards the Huntsville area, and yet that increased population is stagnating in its opportunity to elect candidates of choice. And just as a matter of basic fairness, like sharing candy on the playground, you would think that the state would step back and reconsider and reevaluate how it proportions the congressional districts and the voting strength of the Black and minority population. And that's something that if they had gone into the data and analytics as they were expected to, we should have seen very different behavior in how we saw these lines drawn.
That gets back to what you said in our day one of our forum, that, the apparent inexperience or curiosity of the legislatures to get involved in the mapping process and analyzing the data and seeing where those shifts were. It just kind of appeared that, this community here tonight did more work and was more prepared than our legislatures. So I thank you. Chris, do you have anything else to say?
I guess my comment really has to do with legislation in general. This was probably one of the most carefully studied things the Alabama legislature ever did. And I agree with every comment you made about how little study they put in it. And it's really more of a comment on how they normally consider and pass legislation.
That makes me sad. Sad.
Well,
Thumbs up.
if you've been involved in the process, you know that it doesn't work as one would think, or the way a high school student would believe after taking a civics course.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. And we're going to have to end up, but Mitchell, do you have anything else to say? I really appreciate all of you tonight. Your remarks have been very helpful and insightful.
No, thanks for having me. And I just, again, I guess tripling down on my comments that, throughout, we're seeing this as a pattern across the South, and we have to be cognizant, that because we don't have Section 5 anymore, states are going to try all matter of different things to suppress the vote, suppress the Black vote, to take us back to a bygone era. And so I just want to make sure that we all are ready for that fight, and we all are ready to do what it takes to fight back. And your presence here today says that. And thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Again, we had Mitchell Brown from the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, and Christie, and Dr. Kareem Crayton, who is I guess he's just a mapping expert and on the legislature here. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing and for your insights tonight. I think they're very helpful. All right, next, we are going to talk an update on what happened in the legislature tonight. We have been very fortunate to have Alabama Values Progress has been providing this to the community. They've been watching the legislature and giving us some feedback on what went on. And we have Kendra tonight again, Kendra Majors with the Alabama Values Progress. Thank you, Kendra, for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. So this is going to be a little bit shorter than normal tonight, but during today's special session, the Senate passed, the congressional plan and the House plan, and also the House passed the Senate plan and the state BOE plan. We saw much of the same things that we've seen all week long, contentiousness and, just lots of questions and back and forth, as we've pretty much said the whole process. There's so much to report that went on today that I'm going to show a few clips like I did the past few nights, but if you have extra time, I do encourage you to go and look at the clips. We've clipped them like we had, like we've done, recorded them and clipped them out like we've done the last few days, and I'll post that when I get done in the chat so you can have that. Let's see, I'm going to try to share these. Usually Anisha helps me, but she's not able to get on tonight. But I will say, I'm going to show this clip about an exchange between Senator Bobby Singleton and Senator McClendon about just about the Pringle plan. Give me just a second to get it going for y'all. Let's see.
Number 4, that we've gotten all the way to a 4 that none of the committee members, Republican or Democrats in this body, has ever seen this. Some of these members don't know what their House district even look like now. They don't know, but everybody's sitting back all cool and calm and collective. Some of these folks probably finna run against them because they probably got what they wanted in their House district to run against them in their Senate districts. But everybody happy, because everybody's just buying into it. But this is a Pringle 4 that nobody knows what's in this Pringle 4. The map is so vague that we can hardly look into to see exactly what it is that we're looking at in terms of real numbers and splits, because you can't see everything on these maps. And that brings pause for us to stand here and talk about it, and then for you not to be able to answer any questions, it's even more disturbing. It's even more disturbing. So, I'm just as appalled that we went down this road with the House. And let me say to you, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your steadfastness and at least stand on top of it and maintaining your map to do what you did, okay? I might have had to vote against it. I may have not liked everything, but at least you stood strong and you didn't go through a whole lot of changes based on what we had already seen. But this is a plan 4. That's disturbing to me. That means he've gone through out the one that we drafted, we adopted in the committee on last week, Tuesday, I think it was. He has come along and drafted 3 more plans that we hadn't seen. Now, if that was going to be the plan, I don't know why all the trickery going on here, and we keep saying that because he went back and met with folks. He had already met with these folks already prior to this. So what the difference between plan 1 and plan 4 that he had to satisfy somebody about? Because that's all it was about. It wasn't about any of the legal reasons that we changed because something might have been unconstitutional, or we didn't follow a trail or map or water, or, we went over here and we took some VAP for someone else and we need to bring it back and bag it out over there. None of those reasons that I understand this morning But here we are with a plan number 4. And I don't know why.
Okay. So we also saw a little discussion between Senator Singleton and McClendon also about the League of Women Voters map that he and Smitherman sponsored. He noted that the map was turned in on time, and he asked McClendon if they gave any consideration to it, and he also said he knew that they really didn't. When he asked McClendon said it had serious flaws, including a really severe violation of the rule not to pit incumbents against each other. So I'm going to show that clip also.
You know, that scares me because it says Pringle Congressional 1, and I guess I don't want it to be like it was with the House map, that Pringle holds all of that information in his head. And, you know, because I do want to ask these questions, that's what scares me there. And I guess when I want to go back to the question you just answered, the question about the League of Women Defense map, based on that you thought that there were flaws. When you say flaws, what kind of flaws were you speaking of? Are you talking about split counties, deviations? What kind of flaws are you basically speaking of?
Are you ready?
Sir?
Are you ready? Among other things, we have a really severe violation of the guideline to not pit incumbents. And this plan puts Representative Rogers and I should say Congressman Rogers and Congressman Palmer have been placed in the same district.
Okay.
This is the issue. This violates Section 2JI, which says contests between incumbents will be avoided whenever possible. Thank you. So, excuse me, just
yes, please go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a good bit of paper up here. I need to mark it. Okay, Senator, I'm back with you again. So, right off the bat, this proposal, which came from this proposal that came from the League of Women Voters, immediately violates the concept of taking two existing office holders and placing them in the same district.
Is that a legal argument, though, or is that just a rule?
Section 2, parentheses, J, parentheses.
That's of our rules, but is that a legal argument?
It's part of our own. It would be a violation of the guidelines that we adopted.
I got you.
So we would be. You see the problem with that? That's a problem. So Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act requires the legislature to draw a majority black district when it can be done. Generally speaking, and the Reapportionment Committee's plan demonstrates that it is possible to do that. In the committee's plan, CD7 has a strong black voting age population, or BVAP, of 54.22%.
Would you admit that that district is gerrymandered, though? In order to get that population?
Gerrymandering's in the eye of the beholder.
No, the gerrymander is legal. It's not just in the eye of the beholder. There is a definition. There is a legal concept for gerrymander. It's not in.
So I chuckle a little bit because McClendon seems to be taking a few words from Dorman Walker. Because during the public hearings, I asked them a question about what would happen or how it can be fair if a party is overwhelmingly controls the state legislature in them trying to make fair maps. And Dorman told me that it was fairness is in the eye of the beholder. And then essentially McClendon said the same thing, except for he was talking about gerrymandering. So I guess, you know, we've seen that what their fairness is and what their, you know, just what their maps are looking like. So anyway, they also discussed having, you know, just one majority minority district, and then how they could manage to have one in the congressional and manage to get two in the state school board. Then a little later, Smitherman introduced a substitute bill. Anyway, I'm trying to make this short for you guys tonight. And he and McClendon went through a series again, and I'm going to play that for y'all to see. Let's see.
Alabama whole county map, and that's this map right here, makes it easy for citizens to know which congressional district they live in, and creates two districts, 6 and 7, that provide black citizens an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. The U.S. Supreme Court has said the one person, one vote principle can be more flexible when using traditional boundaries. The proposed Alabama whole county map has a maximum population deviation of only 2.46. For Alabama, it has the lowest possible population deviation based on whole county districts. It eliminates the racial gerrymandering, and it better complies with the Voting Rights Act. For Alabama congressional districts, the whole county map is the best possible map. Now, I want to share that with each person.
Okay, and I have one more to show that kind of goes along with that.
Be in compliance with the section 199 of the Constitution, which requires us to consider and provide whole counties as in drawing our districts, so that the citizens once again can have an opportunity to be represented, and you keep intact as well communities of interest. Mr. Chairman, I will shift back to you at this moment. That's right. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the.
You have
All right. Senator Smitherman, you yielding the mic?
if he has any questions or comments or anything like that, I would.
Okay.
All right.
Senator McClendon.
I will point out with this particular map from the League of Women Voters, there's three big problems here, really big problems. You pit two incumbents. That violates our rules. You eliminate a minority district. That violates the Voting Rights Act. And with that, and I will make one correction. I believe you stated that the proposed map, the Pringle map, splits Montgomery County three ways. It is currently split three ways. The new map that I have proposed splits it in two different. And with that, Mr. President, I move to table.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
No. Well, just one
All right,
minute,
so
Mr. President.
hold on. The motion's non-debatable.
It's,
There was-
Mr. President, I said I yield for any question or comment. I didn't yield for any motion. I was specific. I think I was.
Yeah. So the motion's up, so you can, kill it. So what are you on? All right. No, you can't speak to the table of motion. There's 3 hands up, so. Right.
Call the roll.
Y'all want a roll call?
So as you can see, that was kind of interesting tactic that McClendon used to try to go ahead and table it. I have a clip of his response after Smitherman called him out. He pretty much attempted to act like that he didn't know that McClendon wasn't completely yielding to him.
At that moment for that purpose, I actually wasn't through talking. I know the vote would have, let me just finish.
Okay.
It's not about what the vote would have ultimately been. It's about the process to get to that ultimate vote. Now, I don't fault the desk at all because the motion, they're right. The motion was made by you to do that and it's non-debatable. So I want them to understand that. But the proper thing for you to do based on when you saw that I came up and said that because of the way that we are conducting ourselves in this process, which is really not adversarially other than adversarial about the issues, would have been to withdraw your motion so that I could finish. And then when I give me the opportunity to make my motion, and then you come in with your tabling motion and we still would have voted and it would have been down. Okay, now that's the second time that, well, it's by whatever reason that we've had these close scrimmages. Yesterday when we came back, I ain't heard no bell or nothing about one exact time that we supposed to be here. And some of y'all didn't either because you was running down the hall with me. So I know that. Now I'm up here and you kind of pull the trigger real fast. And that wasn't necessary. That's not necessary. That's all I want to, because you're going to be up here for the rest of these that we going through. That ain't necessary. You don't have to do that. That's why I gave the mic back to you. I wasn't trying to shield the mic from you doing something like that. You saw how I just said, okay, it's back to you. I thought you might have had something you wanted to say, and you did. You made some comments. And I thought I was clear. I said further comments or whatever, because you still were going to get your shot to bring your motion to table it. But as we go forward, please, because we are in let me say this. We are in a scrimmage about this, but we're in a war about downstairs. Am I right? Okay, so that's all I'm saying. Don't make this a war up here. You know that we don't want. We didn't come trying to fight no war.
Senator,
here. So I just, you know, if we would be fighting it. So you know that. So that ain't a confusion. I'm being honest. So all I was saying was just that, please, as we go forward, don't pull the trigger like that. That's all I'm asking you. There's a request.
let me respond.
Okay.
Make your intentions clear. Make sure I understand what your intentions are.
I
have no problem with you having your turn and more at the mic and expressing yourself. And
I know you don't.
I have no problem with that.
I believe that.
I think, in fact, that it's important that it be done. So let's just make sure as we go through this process today, and there's going to be more, that we're real clear with each other what our intentions are.
Okay.
And you all have been, I think, very cooperative in this process and very civil. And it is my intent to try to return that favor equally, if not more so. But I appreciate your comments, and I take them to heart.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate you too. And I as well as Senator Singleton or anyone else come up, understand that we will be crystal clear. Okay, we gonna be crystal clear. We gonna respond to what you asked us to do. We gonna be.
Yeah, so that was a hot mess there too. Moving into the House today, they debated for more than 2 hours on resolutions. And notice I said resolutions, not bills. One subject was condemning the vaccine mandate for federal employees, and another was opposing the Biden administration's tax information reporting proposal as an invasion of privacy. I did not pull any clips from that because it didn't directly deal with redistricting, and that's kind of what we're talking about. But if you have 2 hours of your life to waste and you want to see how crazy that was, check out the clips that we, recorded for you guys. And also you guys can follow us on social media, Alabama Values Progress, and we'll keep you informed. And I'm going to drop that link to the, there's a whole bunch of videos from this week and last week from all the recordings of every single committee meeting and all the chamber meetings. So anybody who hasn't seen them, who wants to take a look at them, can have access to those. So thank you guys.
Hey, Kendra, thank you so much. So I do have a quick question on Pringle 4. So that was introduced, and that was the one that was passed with really no understanding of what it did.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Wow. Okay. Hey, thank you so much, Kendra. You guys do great work, and we really appreciate you. We are going now. We're going to have Rodricia Rousseau with AEPN. She's going to talk about how Alabama citizens can get involved and make sure your voices are being heard. Rodricia?
I'm not seeing. I'm looking.
You can't find her? Well, I don't see her there either. Okay, well, let's go. We do have a question, and Tish is going to answer this question, I believe. Tish, go tell Fox, if you bring Trish up. The question is from Mike Nunes, and he says, am I understanding correctly that all 3 adopted plans were passed without any changes from the original presentation?
No.
As I understand, that is not correct. I know that for the congressional, let me not fib here. For the congressional map, the committee's initial draft plan was augmented. I was to say no. I was going to say by the Pringle map, but the commission's original plan went through as initially proposed. However, there were accepted amendments on the House plan and on the Senate plan that incorporated concerns or complaints from the majority delegation to address some of those concerns. I am less familiar with all things school board, but on the ledge maps, they were very careful about listening closely to what the folks had to say and doing some mitigation of the damage that occurred there. The concerns that were noted from the minority party were all pretty technical, and all of those were voted down on party lines.
Okay, so it pretty well answers, because there were just a few concerns. I believe that Kendra showed us little clips that the GOP, that the majority brought forward during their discussion. So those are the ones they addressed, and they didn't address any of the minority priorities. Okay.
I see a question, Pam, asking me to talk about the effect of the high population districts. Is this voter dilution? Is it voter suppression? The easiest part of that question, is it voter suppression? I think that as a technical matter, the answer is no. We don't attribute voter suppression to the efforts that our state legislators are making in their redistricting. However, by having those outlying rural counties reach in and scoop into the more high population urbanized areas, in many instances, that is a dilution of the voting power of Black voters, Black and minority voters in those areas. For example, as Felicia is teaching us, as she is talking about Jefferson County has a population that could comfortably accommodate, I believe it's 5 districts, but it's actually split into 7, so that those outlying rural counties around Jefferson County that are predominantly white are scooping in and getting the benefit of the population in Jefferson County, but it's kind of breaking up the power of that voting block. If we just saw Jefferson County within the county boundaries being divided up into districts, which is population numerically possible, all of those districts would be majority, minority, or opportunity districts. And I believe Felicia's education to us has shown us they would all be majority, minority. Similarly, in Montgomery County, we have some districts that are very tightly packed right next to jurisdictions in which the Black voting age population is in the low 20s or low 30s, therefore making those districts less competitive for candidates of choice for Black voters. It makes no sense to me that you have one district within the county that's 80% Black, and then right next to it is a county that's 20 or 30% Black. Clearly, if you took that geographic area and split it differently within the county, you could at least make those districts more competitive rather than having one of them being a deep blue district and the other one being a deep red district. And at the end of the day, part of what the ACLU is really strongly supporting here is returning voting power and autonomy to places in the state in which we know the wealth of the state is generated, the jobs of the state are generated, but the political power of that area is being diluted and giving that power out to the rural areas and the suburbs where predominantly white families, predominantly Republican families, predominantly communities that don't share interests with the cities are exercising their power. And of course, I am always willing to yield the floor to Felicia because of the depth of her knowledge and experience on that splitting.
And you know, we also saw that in Madison County and Limestone County, the same issue. Madison County's been broken into 5 Senate districts, and it really should only be 3 Senate districts. And we saw the Alabama A&M split basically in 2, and where the students would vote is now in a 91% white district, which is very much rural. So we're seeing it across. And you know, the rural versus urban, you're seeing it, and you're seeing how they're manipulating these to ensure. And one of those districts, by the way, that Senate district was one of the 2 that's competitive. And by taking the university out, the Alabama A&M, they made it less so competitive.
And Pam, I think that it's important that folks internalize what our legislature has said is most important to them as they are drawing these lines. They are turning and focusing on the preferences, wants, and desires of those who are currently serving, rather than being beholden to the letter and spirit of the law so that the people can select the representation they prefer. And for anyone who believes in representative democracy, the first stop should not be to talk to the legislator to make sure that they are satisfied with the contours of their district, especially when those legislators are business people who do lots of other things and not specialize in the legal responsibility of what their district must do and consider.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tish. I think that's all our questions for tonight. I do want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you to our speakers tonight. Our panelists were really insightful. They're very knowledgeable, and I think we gained a lot from listening. I want to say thank you I think this forum has been very insightful to people. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. It's been a very whirlwind 3 days that we've been through this week alone, and just keeping up with everything. And I just want to give a big shout out to this collaboration of this group, which includes the League of Women Voters, the ACLU, Alabama Values Progress, Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Alabama Forward, Alabama Election Protection Network, TOPS, and the Legal Defense Fund, because the fact that we worked together so well this past week on this, it says a lot. Thank you very much. Good night.
So we do have Felicia who can talk about do the call to action.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Felicia.
Like I know Rodriguez had a lot going on today. I was like, I can pinch hit.
Yeah.
So like everybody's heard today, things have been kind of expectedly off the rails, and I think it's important for everybody to know. We've said this before, but just to emphasize, this is happening in your local legislators as well. So your county commissioners, your city council districts, and so on and so forth. So we've got two things for you to do. One is to go to voteprotection.org and to click on that letter to legislators. Yes, they passed the maps today, but we want them to know that people are not happy. We don't want to just drop off and make it seem like people were only engaged because there was like this active thing to respond to. That we do legitimately care about these maps. This isn't some political stunt. This isn't some outrage machine. We are real residents of the state, and we care, and we're not happy about it. So that's the first ask. And the second is to be involved in local redistricting. So you can get engaged on voteprotection.org. Again, you can also message any of the crowd fellows. That's what we're doing a lot of work on. Stephanie, for example, is doing amazing work in Huntsville and Madison County in general. Kadita has been doing a lot of work in Montgomery and the surrounding, Black Belt counties. Shalila has been holding it down in Mobile, and I'm just sort of everywhere. So I'm doing a lot of work in like Central Alabama, the Wiregrass area, Tuscaloosa, so on and so forth. So wherever you live, this is happening. And as maddening as it was to watch this statewide, there are almost no eyeballs on your local process. So let's see. Helen is mentioning, yes, that there is a hearing at 9 p.m. Thursday. 9 p.m.? Is that 9 p.m. or 9 a.m., Helen? But tomorrow there's the Jefferson County Commission meeting that you may have noticed. Yes, 9 a.m. That sounds more right. That was not well publicized, and frankly, I'm glad to find out the actual time of that, because I have been going through hell and back trying to get that actual time for that meeting. So again, these things are not being very accessible, and the best way to disinfect this process is with a lot of us all just trying to check in on these processes locally. So I would just ask everyone to please stay involved in that, and please keep your eyes peeled.
Hey, Felicia, thank you so much. And a shout out to the crowd fellows. They will continue working, and you'll continue working on the communities, right? The cities and counties as we progress through this. Because I know here in North Alabama, I think January and December, November and January is when we're going to see some voting of the maps. And I'm sure that's the same way across the state. Different areas are still going on, so get involved. Thank you so much. And Kathy?
And we have Sheila Tyson would like to speak, please.
Okay.
Just one moment. I'm gonna have to go find her and bring her in.
Okay.
I gotta find her on this list. Just a second.
And I believe Sheila Tyson, she's a commissioner, is that right? Or on this,
Yeah.
She's
Just
the
one.
Jefferson County Commissioner. She's my county commissioner.
okay.
I'm just trying to find her on the list. Is she on a panelist or on the attendee?
I don't,
I don't believe she's in either list. I
no, I
see
don't
her
see her on
either.
either one, Kathy.
Is she on Facebook or what?
Helen Rivas had notified us that she was trying to get attention. Maybe Helen could fill us in on what she has to say.
All right, hold on. Helen, did you want to, I have opened up the mic for you if you want to, I don't know if Sheila Tyson is with you. Hold on. Helen, you're going to have to come off of mute. And can you turn your camera on? Oh, okay. All right. So if you're off, you're able to speak if you want to go ahead and speak.
She doesn't have a mic, she says. Is it just that Sheila Tyson's been trying to get everybody the attention to that Jefferson County Commission meeting tomorrow on county redistricting? She wants attendance tomorrow at 9 a.m. For the Jefferson County Commission on and they're going to be discussing redistricting. So get that out to everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. We'll get that from her and promote it.
Post that on our Facebook and get it out on social media. That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, I think we're ended. Appreciate everybody. Good night.